Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on the absolute bedrock of pharmaceutical quality in the U.S., 21 CFR Parts 210 and 211, specifically Subpart A. Look, if you're working anywhere near finished pharmaceuticals, this is the legal foundation of literally everything you do. We're going to unpack the framework, nail down the precise vocabulary inspectors are using, and establish exactly what constitutes compliance. Let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll take a macro to micro approach, starting with the regulatory framework, before narrowing down into the scope of Section 211.1. Then we'll define our key vocabulary in Section 211.3, examine the compliance baseline, and finally look at operational risks and audits.
Right, Section 1, the regulatory framework, covering Parts 210 and 211. To really grasp U.S. cGMP, you have to understand the vital relationship between Part 210 and Part 211. Think of it like a blueprint for a highly complex building. Part 210 is basically your vocabulary. It's incredibly brief. We're talking just 3 sections long, but it lays down the absolute legal foundation and your core definitions. Part 211, on the other hand, that's your operating manual. This is where the applicability is detailed, where execution is mandated, and where subparts B through K tell you exactly how to run a compliant facility.
And the crucial takeaway here is simply this. Without those precise definitions locked down in Part 210, the operational instructions over in Part 211 would be a completely ambiguous mess. You just can't execute the manual if you don't fully understand the language it's written in.
Moving on to Section 2. The scope of Section 2111.1, which is all about applicability.
So, Section 211.1 draws these strict boundaries of Subpart A. Who and what does this actually apply to? Well, it's pretty definitive. It applies to the preparation of all finished pharmaceutical dosage forms. Whether we're talking about manufacturing human tablets or sterile veterinary injections, Part 211 establishes the absolute minimum baseline inspectors are going to expect. And crucially, you have to read this alongside the broader Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, specifically 21 U.S.C. 331 and 351.
Which brings us to Section 3. Section 211.3 definitions are key vocabulary. Now we're getting into the critical terminology that gets used across all the subsequent subparts. First up, what exactly is a batch? Legally speaking, it's a specific quantity of a drug produced according to a single master production record. So it is a defined, finite amount manufactured in one very specific cycle. But here is the critical distinction we need to make. What's the difference between a lot and a batch? Well, a lot can be an entire batch, sure, but it can also be a specific, identified portion of a batch. And why does that nuance actually matter? Traceability. Let's say you're packaging a massive batch over 3 separate days. You'd assign 3 different lot numbers just to track those specific time-bound portions.
Next up, we have component. The regulation is crystal clear here. A component covers absolutely any ingredient intended for use in the manufacture of a drug. That actually includes ingredients that might not even make it into the final product. If it is intended for use in the process at all, legally it's a component, and it is subject to strict quality controls.
Rounding out our glossary, we have the drug product. This is your finished dosage form, the actual tablet, the capsule, or the vial that contains both the active pharmaceutical ingredients and the inactive excipients. This is the thing that ultimately reaches the patient, and making sure it's safe is the ultimate end goal of every single control outlined in Subpart A.
All right, Section 4.
The compliance baseline, also known as the legal floor.
We need to shift gears now to a very direct executive view of compliance. When the FDA talks about minimum cGMP requirements, you have to understand that cGMP is the legal floor. It is definitely not the ceiling. It's literally the absolute lowest bar of compliance permitted. True quality management, that means adding robust controls that are proportional to patient risk and aiming well above this minimum baseline.
And that brings us to a pretty stark legal reality under the FD&C Act. A drug is deemed adulterated if the methods or facilities used for its manufacture, processing, packing, or holding do not conform to good CMGP. I want you to really notice the implications there. The physical product doesn't even have to fail a lab test to be considered adulterated. If your methods fall below the baseline, the drug is legally adulterated by default.
And as you know, distributing an adulterated drug carries some severe, immediate consequences. If a site falls below that minimum baseline, the FDA's enforcement toolkit is massive. They can issue import alerts to block your products right at the border. They can physically seize your inventory. They can seek court injunctions to completely shut down your operations. And if the violations are willful, you're looking at severe criminal liability. The stakes literally could not be higher.
Let's move to Section 5, Risks and Audits, focusing on practical operations.
Let's step away from the legal theory for a minute and look at the practical realities on the manufacturing floor. What are inspectors actually citing on a Form 483 when it comes to Subpart A? This table walks us through some really common risk flags. If your site procedures aren't aligned with current regulations, your mandatory mitigation is a rigorous annual gap review. If personnel roles are undefined, you absolutely have to implement a written roles matrix. If you've got definitions being used inconsistently across different departments, you need a central glossary meticulously aligned with Section 211.3. And finally, if your overarching quality manual fails to reference cGMP, you need to update it to cite those regulations explicitly. These are all highly actionable takeaways you can audit your facility against right now.
So, to summarize the practical implications of Subpart A, you must follow and document every single requirement. You have to ensure independent verification and release authority within your quality unit. Universal training is a must, so everyone understands their exact role. And never forget the golden rule of cGMP. If there are no records, compliance simply doesn't exist. Plus, because state-of-the-art expectations are always evolving, your quality management system has to evolve right alongside current inspections and guidance.
Before we wrap up this explainer, let's do a quick self-audit just to lock in your understanding. Based directly on the source material we've just looked at, under Section 211.11 are cGMP requirements described as the maximum standards, the minimum baseline, optional guidance, or applicable only to active pharmaceutical ingredients. Take a quick second to think about the exact phrasing we discussed.
Spot on. The answer is B. cGMP is the minimum baseline. It is the legal floor. I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. If you're only ever aiming for compliance, you're aiming for the absolute minimum acceptable standard permitted by law. True pharmaceutical quality means building robust, risk-based systems that sit well above that regulatory floor. That mindset perfectly primes us for our next lesson, where we'll dive into Subpart B and the heavy responsibilities of organization and personnel. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep aiming above the baseline, and I'll see you next time.